In many countries of the world, when people get married, it's quite normal that people keep their own surname. Yet in some modern countries, this is not the case. It's expected that the woman takes the man's name. But does it need to be this way? Can we have a discussion about which name is taken and what's the benefit of that? Can we talk this through? Is this a negotiation that the couples can have before they get married? Enjoy this conversation as we talk about married name choices with Melania Joy.
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello and welcome to eShare. Here we discuss, promote, and share the benefits to all from living in an egalitarian society, including for men. Inaccurate propaganda leads some men to believe that they miss out with equality. The reality, suppressing women is detrimental to men. Creating a world where everyone can contribute equally makes everyone better off. And today it is my great pleasure to welcome back Melania Joy. Now, Melania is the founder of Name Choices. Now, Melania began Married Name Choices to help women understand that their worth, identity, and place in society is equal to that of the man she's marrying. Welcome, Melania.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Damian. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, it's fabulous talking to you as well. And we're heading into winter here, but we've had lots of sunny weather, and I'm not sure what it's like in your part of the world, but I know it's evening where you are, and it's morning where I am. I love where we're at in today's society, that we can actually connect and create relationships with people all around the world in this manner.
Yeah, I'm in Chicago, so you're right. It's we're going into spring. Things are just starting to bloom, and we've had a 80-degree day or two, but typically it's still around 50 degrees during the day. So it's just starting to get into spring and the nice weather.
Yeah, and I have to translate that later because to 80 degrees to me is close to boiling because we're in Celsius.
Oh, really? Okay, 80 degrees is lovely.
That's nice. And married name choices. Do you want to tell us about the start of that and what brought that into mind and what you're trying to achieve with that?
Sure, I would love to. So I loved your opening remarks and your purpose on this podcast, all about egalitarianism, and that's the same purpose that I put into Married Name Choices, is to help couples look at the fact that they're both coming into this relationship as equal people, equal partners coming into the relationship. And one way to do that is also by looking at the married name that you choose, or looking at all the married name choices that the couple has. Historically, we've had the tradition brought over from the English common laws that, when a woman got married, she was covered by her husband, and she would drop her name and take on his name. And there was a lot of other rights that she also lost in addition to her name. So, of course, those laws have now been chipped away throughout the, last couple hundred years. And in the United States, it wasn't until 1983 that the last state, Alabama, allowed women to keep their name as their own, their maiden name as their married name. That was the last of the 50 states to allow that. So it wasn't that long ago that there were laws in place, but now it is equal, and men can change their names, women can change their names, but there's still this tradition of women dropping their names and taking on the husbands. So married name choices is about looking at coming into this decision together and deciding together, my name is important, your name is important, I'm important, you're important. Let's choose together what we want to do with our name.
Yeah, that's interesting because I didn't know that in relation to the law. I didn't know that in relation to the law at all, that there was a
Uh-huh.
requirement for the woman to take the man's name, and certainly not that it was as recent as 19, was it 1983 you said that it was Alabama?
1983, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Right, right. Yeah.
but it's
And there's
go ahead.
I was gonna say there's always little nuances, so it wasn't as blatant as you must take his name, but there were things like, well, you can't get your voter's card or your driver's license or get a credit card unless you're using your husband's name. But if you don't have any legal documentation saying my name is, has my husband's last name on it, well, then you didn't have the legal documentation to do all these other things to be a full citizen.
Yeah, so it's kind of I don't know if catch 22 is the right phrase, but you had to state you
Right,
were married, and then if you were married and it wasn't the same as your husband's name, you got stopped there. Is
right.
that the situation?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I mean, the part looking at is where you talk about the woman being lesser if she takes the man's name. What's behind that psychology? Because I didn't make that
Mhm,
connection when it was okay. The woman's taking the man's name. It just seemed to be,
mhm.
and it wasn't something I gave thought to, which is what you're doing. You're raising this as a point.
Right,
How is it that it is lesser for a woman to take a man's name, or vice versa? I mean,
right.
even going the other way, if man was to with what you're
Mhm.
aiming for, that it's lesser for the man to do that.
Right. Yeah, I think it's more it's I think you look at it this way. I mean, when people, and for myself, for example, when I first got married, I was 21. I had just turned 21. Um, I hadn't finished college yet. I had a driver's license. I had a bank account, but other than that, I didn't have a lot of identity with my maiden name. Of course, that was my family name, the name that I grew up with. But as far as my identity in my adult life, it wasn't that difficult to change my name at that time. But as the age of first time brides and grooms are increasing, many of them aren't getting married into their late 20s, early 30s. Many of them have college degrees, they have passports, they have bank accounts, they own property, and so now that you're an adult and you've established your identity as an
Mm,
adult with a specific name, then to all of a sudden change that name, you're kind of in a way changing your identity. So it's one thing to go into it consciously and say, I would like to change my name. And people change their names all the time for all different reasons. Sometimes they just don't feel that their name fits, that it doesn't fit their
mm,
sexual identity, it doesn't fit their religious identity, it doesn't fit, whatever it is. And they want to change their name to make it fit their identity.
mm,
But when but when you're kind of expected or assumed that you're just going to drop that part of your identity without really having any say in it or any choice in it, it's
mm.
just it creates that inequality in the name choices. And I
Yeah.
think men are starting to see that too, where it's like, okay, wait a minute, well, if if both of us could change our names, well, you kind of have to put yourself in those shoes too. If you're 30 and you've already established your adult identity, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, I don't want to give up my name, I don't want to take on somebody else's name. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's more, it's more yeah, people need to come together on an equal playing level field and just say, we both have names, we both have identities. How do we want to move forward with this? Do we both want to have the same name? So, if we have a family, we all have one family name. Do we both want to keep our own names? Do we want to hyphenate? Do we want to create a new one? There's so many different options now. And so it's more about coming together and deciding, how they want to move forward together as a couple.
Yeah, that's a very good point that you raised there. That if you've gone on and established your identity, then to
Right.
change that is it's a big thing. And I have a number of friends and talk to people on this show as a couple where
Hmm.
they got together very early, so
Hmm.
they developed together. And there's certain benefits to that, certainly with
Right.
longevity of relationships. If you've chosen the right person, as you've got to choose the
Right.
right
That's the
person.
hope, right? Yeah.
There's a,
Uh-huh.
and
Right.
that's a different discussion. Um, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's an interesting point that you raise about from that perspective of having an established identity. Because I look at that, I mean, from my first marriage, which I got married late in, like,
Uh-huh.
well, probably normal for a lot of people, but nowadays, but my now ex-wife, um, you know,
Uh-huh.
she had an identity as well, and for and that's where I wanted to get to another point was creating that clan identity for your family, because I know, and it's come from a number of women, that they like that feeling of being part of a clan, and that was maybe their upbringing
Right.
or whatever, and so they wanted
Hmm.
particularly. That they had this identity as a family, but again, those people got
Right.
together early, and
Uh-huh.
did that well. And I looked at it from our perspective, and I was thinking about what you were saying. From my first wife's perspective, there were areas where she used um, her mate. Well, it was a maiden name. It was her marriage, first marriage to her marriage to me was her second marriage. So she'd changed the
Right.
name, then gone back to her
Uh-huh.
maiden name. And so there was
Right.
areas, particularly to do with her career, where she was known as by her maiden name, and then areas
Hmm.
where we were as a family that was using my name. I don't know. We
Hmm.
didn't really discuss it in detail. It just kind of flowed that way, and it wasn't an expectation on my
Right.
behalf that she do that either. It just kind of went that way. Um,
Right.
and but just from that, you know, where was I going with that? With this, I'm going with the clan side of things. Is that something as well to consider? I mean, from that side of things, of creating your family identity.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who would like to, as they get married, start you're starting a new chapter in your life. You're coming together as a couple, and if you choose to have children, it's
That was the
people
point.
love to have the same last name, the whole family. I think again that's part of our tradition growing up. I did talk to a friend who they had in the tradition that she grew up in, that it was very common for the husband and wife to have different last name.
Mm,
So they didn't feel that marriage was a reason to change names.
mm,
So, husband and wife had a different last name, and then when they had children, then a lot of times they kind of combined the two names, or
mm.
so she said it was very common for a family to have three different last names in the same family. But I know in the United States and in a lot of different customs, it's it's nice to have that family feeling, and having the all have the same last name is very powerful in creating that
Mm,
family feeling, that united feeling. So yeah, so a lot of people would like to, when they have children, have the husband and wife have the same name as the child.
mm,
And again, that's something that I feel that the couple should kind of decide together. And the one, well, I see like three main reasons why men might want to consider coming together and not just assuming, well, I'm going to keep my name and, I'm going to be supportive of whatever my wife wants to do with her name. If she wants to keep her name, if she wants to change her name, if she wants to hyphenate her name, kind of putting all the emphasis on what she wants to do. So my point that I would love to get across to guys is that I think there's 3 reasons why they might want to consider this to be a joint decision. And the first one is just for that reason, that it's a joint decision. It's one of those decisions that you can make together, like what date should we get married and where should we go on our honeymoon, and do we want to, where do we want to live? Do we want to live by your family, my family, by your, where do we want to live? So those are all decisions that a couple can come together and make together. And so I think part of that partnership, a couple can come together and discuss, well, we've got all these options. We're very fortunate. We live in a country that there are no laws telling you have to do this or you have to do that or you can't, as far as married names go. So let's come together and look at all of our different options and make a decision together what we want. And then the second one too is there's a lot of, I've found from couples that I've talked to, there's a lot of feelings underneath. You were talking before about the identity. There's a lot of feelings in there about what a name means to, well, we'll say for guys in this situation. And some one man that I talked to, he said when he first got married, he told his wife, it's a deal breaker. If you don't take my name, it's a deal breaker. And it just so happened she really didn't care, and she took his name. So they went along with that. But he's like, you know what? I never stopped to think, why was that so important to me? And then he said, oh, it's because my dad would think lesser of me if my wife didn't take my name. So, and again, so what does that mean, as far as his relationship with his dad and his relationship with how his dad looked at, I don't know, what did that mean to him? Did that mean that, the husband should have control or say over what his wife does, or, so he was able to go kind of explore that a little bit more in himself to find out why that he had such a strong reaction to that. And there's another guy that I talked to, he's like, but I'm Irish. If I take your name, you have a German name, so then how am I still going to be Irish if I take your German name? So it was just an opportunity to kind of look at all those feelings and thoughts and biases that we have underneath the surface and kind of explore those. And then the third one too is just to help create gender equality in our society, by raising kids, so for them to see, you don't have to, when a heterosexual couple gets married, the woman doesn't have to drop her name and take his name. There's a lot of different choices, and they can show their children that people come together and their names and their identities are kind of on a level playing field, and they come together and they choose what they want to do with their name going forward, instead of assuming one person's going to do one thing and they make the choice together. So those were the 3 ideas I would love for men to explore and just see if that fits for them. And like, hey, you know what? There could be some fun opportunities in this. I just talked to a couple that he grew up loving this movie called the Maltese Falcon. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's a black and white movie way back when. And his name is Sam. And I guess the main character's name in this movie is Sam. Yeah. And lo and behold, he starts dating a woman whose last name is Falcon. And so he kind of joked, early on that, hey, if we ever get married, I'm changing my name to your name so I could be Sam Falcon. And, they did go on and get married, and he changed his name to Falcon because he thought, wow, that's cool. I could be Sam Falcon. So anyway,
No, it's an interesting point you raise, and full disclosure, there I was a massive fan of the Tom Clancy movies, and there was a time I contemplated changing my name to Ryan, being like Jack Ryan, so
Yeah, right?
so we can relate to that. But
Uh-huh.
from that perspective, it's interesting what you mentioned earlier, because I have friends from Colombia, from Spain, and yet their
Mhm,
tradition is they keep
mhm,
their own names, and when they have children, they hyphenate the names together. That's their tradition,
right,
and it's interesting
right,
how we, and I shouldn't say it this way because Spain and those countries are still developed as well, but in we consider
uh-huh.
ourselves to be, I think we consider ourselves to be at the top of that tree. When you look at, there's a number of factors, and I know America and Australia, by many criteria, this is the top of the tree of countries to be in. And yet we're so far behind in that perspective. It's really interesting in that perception of, especially when you put it in the context of equality, and the
Mhm,
benefits we get from equality, that this is
mhm.
something that's taken so long to get there. It's a fascinating point.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
do you think, from the people you've worked with, in having that discussion, that awakening, do you think it's helped develop their relationship and their ability to communicate?
I think so. I think, again, it's one of those things that, as you come together as a couple, you need to have conversations, and at times you need to compromise, and you need to
Mhm.
kind of look at what's best for the relationship. And sometimes, if you come to stalemate, I really like my name, you really like your name, what are we going to do, but
Mm,
again, it's not saying, well, the man's name, the tradition is, and his family would really be upset, so I guess I should really do, it's not that kind of, I guess I'll lower myself and my, um what I want to follow that tradition and what his family wants, and the different generations want. But again, to kind of come together and just make it between the two people and say, well, we've got all these different options, and let's really take the time to look at, why one person feels their name is more important, or they have a higher stake in there. And sometimes it is, maybe sometimes it's because there is a really rich family history with one name and the other
mm,
one isn't, but it could, both of them could have really rich family histories, or one name could be, something that people might consider an unfortunate name, something that kids are really going to get teased about. And you think,
yeah.
well, do we really want to pass that name on? Again, it's tradition. Like, a
Mm,
lot of people have strong feelings about following tradition, but we have choices. And do we really, as you and me as a couple here, is this really what we want to do to our kids and to our future family, to carry that name on?
yeah,
So
it's a
I,
good
I
point.
think,
I was
mhm,
going to say, well,
yeah,
whilst Elliot Ness might be a great name to carry on from the legacy associated with that, Peter Ness is probably not the same when you take the when you just put the initial at the start. So,
right. Uh-huh.
coming to the point that you raised about, with the, you said that generally it's a woman going, she might be more accommodating and take his name, going, oh, if you're having that discussion, go, well, I'll accommodate even though she doesn't really want to.
Right.
Is part of what you're doing there empowering women to say, hey, this is what I want, more so? Because I mean, women are
Mhm.
generally known for being more accommodating than
Right.
men are. Is that part of what you're
Mhm.
working on as well?
Right. Yeah, definitely. I would definitely agree with you, because it is a two-way street. I mean, we're right now I'm talking about, in the United States, but it's, I know Australia's um pretty much follows the same lines, but we were all raised in this society, this, following traditions and female roles and male roles, and what society expects from you. But I completely agree with you that it's trying to wake up women a little bit, and or bringing more to the conscious level. It's like, but we don't. we don't have to do that. We don't have to color in those lines. It's okay to go outside those lines.
Mm,
And I, um, and again, not just saying, well, what do I want to do with my name,
mm,
but more negotiating that name, saying, hey, I really want us to have a family name together, but I really don't want to take Gross Wiener, your name or something. Can we look together at, maybe you taking my name, as an
mm,
option too? Because still, even though women are considering a lot of different options that they have, they really haven't considered the option asking him to take her name as
mm,
much. And or the guy will just say, no, I'm just not going to do it, which, okay, I'm fine, I understand that, but I would really like the children to have my name.
mm,
And because the way I look at it is sometimes, guys will say, hey, I've seen this in couples that I've worked with. It's like, I completely support my wife, she can do whatever she wants with her name, you know but it's kind of like saying, well, I'm going to live in this house and the kids are going to live with me in this house. But you can do what you want. You can live in the house with us, or you could go live in the house next door, or you could go live somewhere else. It's like, well, it's really not an option. I want to live in the house with you and the kids. So, um, it's that really doesn't help saying that,
mm.
okay, I'll just hyphenate, keep my name and hyphenate it with you. So at least then I can have part of the names that the kids have. It's more like, no, we're living in one house. We're gonna have one name. Let's decide. Maybe you take my name. Or maybe let's both of us hyphenate our names, or you know, come up with a new name or something like that, instead of just the woman trying to decide. Well, what am I going to do with my? I don't know. If I don't take his name, then the whole family, I'm not going to have the same name as the rest of the family. So that really doesn't
Mm,
work either. So kind of adding in those other options of the, maybe the man should take the woman's name
yeah.
or create a new name.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, from that perspective, and this is a lot about empowerment and using that word power
Mhm.
because there is some factions. I use the word faction because I think it's cool out there that talk about the difference in the power between men and women, and is part of that is that empowerment to say, hey, this is really important to me, and basically, if it is, shaking him enough so that he does pay attention rather than, because guys can be lazy. That's one of our traits. We can and just go, yeah, whatever.
Hey, you said that. I
I'll
didn't
go
say
along with it, whatever you want.
that.
But is it part of that? And that's the other side of it. It's like going for the woman being empowered to say, hey, this is important to me. We need to have that discussion, and shaking him enough
Right.
so that he wakes up and says, okay, I need to pay attention here, and we need to have that discussion. Is that the underlying
Right.
you're aiming at for both to
Yeah.
have that?
That's why with women, I know your audience is more men in here, but the women's side, I tell them they need to negotiate their last name, not just have a conversation. Because, like you said, sometimes it's like, well, we talked about it. He doesn't want to do it, so I guess I'll just, take his name. It's like, no, you
Yeah.
need to stand up for what's important to you, and if it's really important to you to keep your name. Um, or to at least have a mutual conversation,
Mm,
then maybe say, okay, fine, you can keep your name. If you choose to keep your name, you keep your name. I'll keep my name, but I want our kids to have my name too.
mm,
Because I think, like you said, then that kind of wakes them up like, wait a minute,
mm.
I don't want to be the only one without, with a different last name. I didn't see it going like this, you know. So I think, like you said, that'll kind of wake them up, kind of like, oh, wait, you're serious, and
Mm.
okay, wait, what are all the options again? Let's think it all through again here and
Yes.
see if that's really what we want to do.
That's right, because
Hmm.
I've seen in a number of marriage programs where they define and they're talking generalistically that men are more the takers in a relationship and women are more the givers, and it's generally 20 years down the track that all of a sudden she goes, I've given enough, I can't take any more, it's over, and he's going, what? Everything was fine. It's like, yeah, well, because you were
Yeah.
taking all the time and not giving back. Um,
But I think you're right though. I mean, again, women have been raised in this society, to
mm,
be more take care of her husband, take care of the family. In fact, they did a study, I think it was just in 2017, about what does the population feel about the whole married name situation, and still like 60% of the Americans felt that the woman should take the man's name. And
mm,
when they pressed them a little bit further, it was because they felt still that the woman should put her husband and her family's needs before hers. So, and that
interesting.
continues on to the name too, like, okay, if he really wants this and you really want this, all right, you should probably do what he wants because you should put his needs first. and
So,
and your children's needs first too.
yeah, so was that from the women being, and does that relate to that being more accommodating? That's part of that. Do you know if that survey
Right.
went to that detail or
You know,
not?
I that is one of those things that can get into like that topic of like, how did we get to where we are, kind of a thing, right? It's just
Yeah.
the society that we lived in, and the patriarchal society where men, especially the white men, were making the rules, and
Mm,
um, they had the power, and they kind of set the bar for what women should be, especially attractive, if to be an attractive, worthy woman in our society, you need to play this part. You need to look nice. You need to have, be marriage material. You need to be able to take care of your husband and it's kind of
mm.
that whole definition, and it really gets into really deep layers.
Yeah.
But that's why I just start with married names. Just look at your married name. We don't have to go really deep into this. Just say, hey, wait a minute. My name, my worth, my family, my everything is just as important as yours. So why do I have to just assume I'm gonna drop part of my identity and take yours? Let's
Mm.
come to the level playing field here, and let's just start there. Because yeah, you can go really deep with
Well, that's part of what I want
what.
to understand because I've heard strong women talk about the Cinderella complex, and we're talking about here
uh
asking, and a lot of times
Right.
there'll be, he doesn't do this, and it's like, have you asked him to do it? And it's like, well, no, but he should
Hmm.
just know to do it. A
Uh-huh.
and it's like, well, if you don't, and maybe partly because I deal with a lot of, law cases and things like that, and if you don't ask the court,
Uh-huh.
you're never gonna get it.
Right.
Not saying
Right.
women is the
In
court, but
in
it's just,
fact,
yeah, if you don't
yeah, I wanted
ask.
to mention one interesting thing. I did this, played a little Family Feud game, with
Yep.
the do you know that game? The two
Yeah, yeah.
families, and they ask a question, and what's the top six answers or five answers, and they've surveyed 100 people. So I went and surveyed 100 men. I mean, some of them I talked to, some of them I emailed, some of them I found it on their answers on on different things, or I've had college professors kind of poll the class and stuff like that. And why don't men change their names? Just kind of the thing, the question to put out there. And the one that surprised me, I think it was number three. It was that because I wasn't asked, you know.
Mm,
And women are like, "Ugh, well, he should just know that that's an option." I'm like, why? Why should he know that? I mean, we've
mm,
all been raised in this tradition of men keep their names and women change it, or women choose to do something else. But we, when have we told men, hey, when you get married, you guys are both going to have to decide what you want to do with your name?
mm,
We haven't raised children like that. Our society hasn't, given us even that option.
mm,
So to your point, it's like one is like, oh, I don't want to give up my name, or I don't want to take her father's last name, or whatever kind of more ego things like that. But yeah, one was, well, I never thought about that, or she didn't ask
mm.
me, or I didn't know that was an option, kind of a thing. So to your point, yeah, I think we need to bring it more up to the forefront and say, will you take my name?
Yeah, Because I mean, that's the
Uh-huh.
point, and I've heard that in a number of marriage counselor programs that
Uh-huh.
I've watched and studied and things like that, where they've talked about. It's in books. They said in programs. What other things they said? Yeah, just trying to what was in the category of things like that I've just said. But there's been it's a lot of times men will be understanding if asked.
Mhm.
It's just they're not
Mhm.
asked and saying, going, "Well,
Right,
we didn't know. We're just
right.
men. As much as we can be intelligent, sometimes we're completely oblivious." So
Okay. Didn't know that was an option. I
yeah,
never thought of
exactly,
it.
exactly. So how
Or
would
when
you go ahead?
oh, I just want to go back really quick when you talked about the Cinderella clause. The
Yeah.
other interesting, point that I've seen happen is when sometimes I've read about this. A man will say, "Hey, you know what? I want to take your name when we get married," and she's like, "Whoa, wait a minute! No, no, no!" Because she has this image in her mind of this, romantic. I'm going to get married, and since you're little kids, writing down your name with the guy's name, or playing around with all of that. So her image of her marriage, her Cinderella, like I'm going to find my Prince Charming. We're going to get married. I'm going to take his name, and
Mm.
all of a sudden it gets crushed because he's like, "I'm going to take your name," and she's like, "Wait." So again, it's an opportunity for her to kind of look at, why did I have such a reaction to that?
Mm.
Again, we're on a level playing field. Why is it so important that he keeps his name and she takes his name? So again, it's just kind of looking at all those unconscious biases underneath and all those stereotypes that a lot of times we don't even know have developed, or and being able to kind of break them down and see what's underneath there.
Because that falls into the same category of switching the roles, and I have friends where, she's the career person and
Uh-huh.
he stays home and works, but a lot of
Yeah.
people do struggle with that because it's like the man sh both sides, men well, I shouldn't say sides, both men and women, well, masculine
Uh-huh.
I'll say masculine and feminine, so we include the same-sex couples as well.
Uh-huh.
They have this attitude that the man needs to be the provider.
Mhm.
And so there's this mismatch, and I
Yeah.
understand, where we are in society today. That I think it's about only 40% of men get higher education, whereas or complete higher education, whereas there's a lot more
Right.
women doing that. Um,
Right.
and I was reading a
Yes.
report. So and there was it was discussed about how educated women don't date uneducated men. And so
I
it's
saw that. Uh-huh.
yeah, it's interesting, and,
Uh-huh.
I read and also in the workforce now, when we're talking about equality of numbers, um, in those higher educated professions, the compass is
Mhm.
flipped 100% because there's not as many educated men out there, and they're struggling to find men to fill the roles, which is
Yeah.
really interesting. But from that, I
Yeah.
mean, this all falls under that category of moving towards egalitarian,
Right.
where we can be treated. Doesn't matter what you are; it's just doing what's right for you. Is that where you're headed with
Right.
this as well?
Yes, definitely. And I'm glad you brought up that point about men, because I think this is a great opportunity for men too, because again, we've been raised in this society that our places are kind of made for us. And this is my own opinion because I don't have anything to back it up with, but I think a lot of
We're
people can agree with it
we're
that,
all allowed
you
to have
know,
opinions. Let's create some
you know,
controversy.
so men, especially white men, have been in a more privileged position again
Mm,
with making the rules, having the power, having the money, things like that. And so it's by sitting up there at that privileged position, and then there's all these minority groups underneath trying to get up there, the
mm,
women, the African American, the Asian, anybody who's not up here, they're always trying to get up, they're always trying to push the boundaries and everything. But now, yeah, the privileged ones are sitting up here like, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe I want to be different, maybe
mm.
maybe I want to change my name, maybe I want to stay home and raise the kids." And you see it happening a little bit more, like nurses, I mean, I think it was only about a decade ago when that movie the Faulkners, and
Mm.
he's like, "You're a male nurse," that was like, ugh. Now it's pretty common, to
Yeah.
have male nurses, male
Mm.
flight attendants, and
Mm.
I think it's really, widening and broadening the
Mm.
opportunities that men have. And even when you come back to the married name thing, and again, if you have an unfortunate name, this is a great
Mm.
opportunity to say I've got other opportunities to change it. And one law that I found that was interesting, and I hope men start really fighting for this, is that there's only I think there's 7 states right now. I'd have to go back and check, but 7 of the United States, that when you go to the wherever the courthouse and get your marriage license, it's on the marriage license that you women can just write down their new last name, and and then that's it, and then they have
Mm.
a new last name, and then they have to go and change it with a social security and driver's license and stuff like that. But in only 7 states, men have the same option. A
Mm.
lot in the other 43 states, they can't just change it on their marriage license. They have to go through this whole court process to change their name legally. So I
Mm.
hope more men fight for that. Like, hey, that's not right. We should be able to, change it just as easily as women can change their names.
Let's add that to the list because yeah, I didn't know that in
Uh,
respect of that, and I haven't looked at those forms here in Australia. But certainly, I know
yeah.
I've looked at a lot of court documents, and as far as gender equality goes, they're so far from being gender equal.
Right,
It's just really
right.
the court process is not there yet. I think they
Yeah.
operate in a neutral way, but the documentation behind it is not there. All right, so
Yeah.
we've talked
Yeah.
for a little bit, people who wanting to do this, how do we, I mean, what advice would you give them to raise this with their partner if that's something, if a woman wants
Hmm.
to do that, or if a guy wants to do that? What ways
Hmm.
would how would you encourage people to raise that with their partner
Right.
and go about this process?
Right. Um, So a couple of things that I've been working on. I wrote an article for the Wedding Planner magazine, and so I was talking to a bunch of wedding planners, and
Mm.
they all said it's pretty common now that they, talk earlier and earlier in the process. They talk to the couple about, what have you decided about your married name, or have you had that conversation yet? Because there's still so many couples that are just assuming the wife's just going to, assuming
Mm.
she's going to take his name. But they're seeing that they're starting to need to have that conversation more, because it's not black and white anymore,
Mm.
and it comes up in a lot of the wedding planning, so they're starting to bring it on earlier and earlier. And so, and I just say too, just kind of, it needs to be on a checklist of,
Mm.
go and look at different cakes, go and look at different flowers, have the married name conversation, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of like on the checklist of things that need to be done. I mean, we're not there yet, so
Yeah.
so, and again, it can come from either side, or maybe both sides. Like, hey, and the the less emotion you can put in it, the better off it
Mm.
is.
Mm.
So again, if you're just looking at, so what cake should we have? Should we go with vanilla or should we go with chocolate? If you can kind of keep it on that level and be like, hey, what name are we going to go with? Did you want to go with your name, or should we go with my name? Or let's look at all the options that we have, instead of again, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of tradition, there's a lot of history in this identity topic. And so if you're like, well, I know, I don't want you to get upset with me, but I want to bring up the subject of, like, have you ever thought about taking my name? So if
Mm.
the more that you can come together without the emotion, or without the anticipation that somebody's going to get upset about it, the easier off it is to just, kind of look at it as like a honeymoon destination, or a
Yeah.
or what color should we have at the wedding? What name should we go with?
So having that as
Just to
part of
start the conversation. And, and a lot of times you're not going to be able to just sit down and in 5 minutes say, oh yeah, let's just go with the vanilla cake. It may take a while to even understand what all the options are, and then to one person may have a really strong reaction to, like, what are you kidding me? You want me to take your name? Or so then they have to kind of have the opportunity to spend some time and kind of look at that. So as long as the one guy that I spoke to before, where he said that it was a deal breaker. It was a deal breaker. If she didn't take the name, it was a deal breaker. So, and now this is 15 years down the road. I said, so do you really feel that way? Like, if she had said, no, I'm not going to take your name, would it really have been like, that's it? You would have, like, not married her? And he's like, well, you know, again, it's 15 years down the road. He goes, what was important to me back then isn't as important. He's more mature and he's been able to look at it differently. And again, it was all more about his relationship with his dad. That's really what was
mm,
going on here. And
yeah,
it, and if it was more about the two people coming together, he and his wife, and if you can talk through that a little bit, just kind of like, hey, what's going on there? And again, if you're like, I know sometimes my husband will just, like, hey, let's have hamburgers for dinner. No, we're not having hamburgers. I'm like, okay, well, that was kind of like a strong reaction to the hamburgers here. I don't think it's about hamburgers. Let's, what's going on here? And if you can, again, it's part of the whole conversation.
mm.
How do you have conversations together, and how do you compromise, and how do you work together as a team?
I love that because I
Yeah.
mean, you mentioned negotiation beforehand as well, being able to negotiate. And part of negotiation is being clear about what you want, and also to
Right.
understanding. Big part of that,
Uh-huh.
because I have a very high level negotiation program, and big part of it is
Uh-huh.
to achieve a successful outcome is understanding what the other person's needs and wants are. Or the other,
Right.
if it's a company, what the other company's needs and wants are, and being able to fulfill those. And if you can fulfill them in other ways, all of a sudden you can get what you want as well. So it becomes that it's not a compromise either. I like it 'cause I don't believe in
Right.
compromise. I think you can actually find a way that works for both. That's
Right.
my personal opinion. Since we've
I
been
agree
personal.
with I agree with that, yes.
So how do people contact you? We'll put it in the show notes, but what's the best way to reach them, to reach you and talk about this?
So my website is called marriednamechoices.com, and there's, contact form on there. I'm also on Instagram at Married Name Choices. Kept it consistent, easy to find.
Good marketing. It's good
um,
branding.
Yeah. So, and I offer, 30-minute free consultations. If sometimes, people just want to talk it through with somebody who isn't family, or who doesn't have strong ties into it. And they just want to, like, think through some options and kind of throw some things out. And so I offer 30-minute free consultations that people can sign up for. And, no strings attached, just because I love talking about married names, and I love helping spread this message about, looking at all the different options, and finding what really is best for the couple coming together.
Love that.
Yeah.
Melania, it has been so wonderful having you on the show. Thank you again for sharing that. It's great work that you're doing, working towards egalitarian society. Thank you
Thank
for
you,
joining us and
Damien.
sharing.
Yeah, thank you for your podcast. This is a great podcast, and I love your purpose and your message too.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.